We as conservatives have a vision for how this country should be. Democrats don't have a vision. What they do have is an agenda. They have a checklist. And that checklist says people don't know how to function unless the government has control of their lives. And the American people have decided that is not what they want, because that is socialism, and what the American people want is freedom. So I think right here in this room, this is the reason the left is not going to win this fight. When I look around this room, when I listen to you all participating with the speakers, what I see is a movement that is ready to pull their weight, and a movement that is ready to prove the Democrat Party wrong. That is where we need to be starting on this fight. You are patriots, you are freedom fighters, you are happy warriors. You all have a vision, and that vision says America's best days are ahead of her. They are not behind her. Your vision is that this country is strong, it is prosperous, that our kids are going to have the ability to dream those dreams. So, it is time for everybody to get involved. It is time to go be the candidate in these races. Be the campaign manager. Be the door knocker. Be the poll worker. Get involved in these, because it is imperative that we, the people, be the people in 2022. You know, I've got grandkids, and when I think about this education issue, when I look at all the moms and dads across the country that are standing up, I think about what I want my grandkids to learn. I want them to know that the United States of America, that we trace our founding to 1776, not some arbitrary date that a debunked author from the New York Times decided was going to be the date. I want them to know that this Constitution is our framework, and it is valid, and on it we stand. I want them to know that freedom is worth the fight, and that they should be celebrating their family members that have worn the uniform and have defended this country and have defended freedom. I want them to know the Pledge of Allegiance. I want them to sing the national anthem. I want them to look at the person's character, not the color of their skin. I want them to love free speech. I want them to be able to express their opinion. I want them to engage robust, respectful political debate. I want them to learn to listen. I want them to learn how a bill becomes a law. And I don't want them to go to school and learn how to build a Molotov cocktail for a mostly peaceful protest. Also, I want them to learn the names of our 50 states. I don't want them to feel like they have to learn 50 different pronouns. And I want them to learn that this country is the greatest place on the planet for human flourishing, that this is the country where dreams come true. This is where they can dream those big dreams. And it happens because the people decide they are going to be the people. They are going to fight back. and they are going to preserve faith, family, freedom, hope, and opportunity for all our citizens and all generations. God bless you all. Get ready for the fight. God bless the USA.
This is how you have to visit your son.
My addiction began at the age of 11. This is preventable.
We will cover the biggest issues our kids are facing.
There's something special, and it's going to impact a lot of people's lives.
By the end of the year, we hope to have 1,000 beds.
I wanted to be the first state in the nation that took Victoria's voice and saved life.
I overdosed with pain medicine. Luckily, Narcan saved me. They have these victory clubs which incentivize kids.
Yes, National School Board Association, I know you can hear us. We are loud, we are bold, and we will not be silenced.
What's important about today is we stand for freedom. Now we stand for freedom with the brave people who are taking to the streets in Cuba, but we don't just stand with Cuba, we stand with freedom-loving people everywhere.
But I do want to say to the man that is in that White House, what he has done is simply unacceptable. He has failed the Afghan people. He has failed the Afghan women and children. He has failed our military. He is leaving Americans behind.
You know, all they do is they use us. They've been using us for decades.
We share one thing in common, and that is to protect our children. That is to give our children the best possible education we can in this great country. I am the mother of 5 daughters, and it is a priority that we teach them the good values of America.
Ladies and gentlemen, up next, all the news the left permits. Please welcome Eric Finman. From the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts. Former CEO, Papa John's Pizza, Papa John. And your moderator, from One America News Network, Natalie Harp.
CPAC? Hey, you guys look totally canceled to me, don't you think? Everybody want to sit down? Oh, well, we want to talk about a lot of forbidden topics today, right? But I think we should probably start with the elephant in the room. Actually, no. He's more of a donkey, don't you think? Biden. If only he had gone to the beach. I think even the boss in the parable of the talents would have forgiven him that, don't you think? I mean, hey, at least that bad employee in the story, he at least buried it. He didn't touch it. He left well enough alone. Biden, well, he had to interfere. He had to lose everything. And now we're losing America and the world, really, as we know it. But the one good thing is we may all be in this new and unimproved version of the parable of the talents, but there's more to the story, right? There's us. There's those of us who have been entrusted with so much. And each of you here today, you have a voice. You have a vote. And I know it gets kind of discouraging when you see Biden and his talent for taking 8 circles, kind of like a circle here, turn them into 81 million ballots. But you know what? That doesn't mean we bury our vote. Just because we might be afraid we're going to be canceled, we don't stop talking. We talk even louder because we want to be found greater and stronger than ever before, and that's what our panel right here, you guys are greater and stronger than ever before. So many people have tried to cancel you, and I want to start first with you, Papa John, obviously, because you were the first person to get canceled kind of before it became the thing everybody wants to happen to them, right? It's a badge of honor. But can you talk to us about that?
Well, we were kind of Barbara Mandrell. We were country when country wasn't cool.
Yeah.
It came out of nowhere. We look back on it. We had the notoriety. We had the influence. Company was doing $4 billion, and Papa John's was the American dream. And we were the perfect first target. And they went there, and there was no model. We've since got a program in place. We put it on our op-ed coming up, what to do about this, fighting back, don't let them put out lies, et cetera. But we didn't have a model. We didn't have a program. And I had a board of directors who was really weak, that actually I was behind enemy lines and didn't know it. So you have the target aspect, and you have people around you that let this happen, and before you know it, you have a disaster. And you can relate, Kevin, to being behind enemy lines, being in D.C. Yeah.
That's exactly right. The Heritage Foundation operates behind enemy lines every day on behalf of all these great people who are here.
It's so interesting to see, too, because it's so easy. They call Republicans racist all the time, right? And you look at what happened with Whoopi Goldberg. Here she says the Holocaust has nothing to do with race. They say, oh, she's going to be suspended for 14 days. It ends up being 13 days. And yet you've been fighting your whole life to break out of this label of being racist. And we were talking earlier, Eric, you actually almost lost your business because your assets were frozen. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of my background, I got into Bitcoin back in like 2011, and I was, secretly conservative for a long time. And then I decided, hey, if you've got, FU money, pardon my French, might as well try to, say FU sometimes. And I wanted to start a project that would solve all this App Store censorship. Like they banned Parler, completely ruined that business. And I started something called the Freedom Phone. And then literally, we made $3.5 million in 8 hours of our launch. And then right after that, all the payment processors froze every single dime. So you think, well, $3.5 million, that's a lot of money, right? But then they froze all of it. Not a penny of that was ever sent to our bank account. So what they did to us is the same thing they were doing with the truckers now. It was horrible. And, and you're on the hook to get all these amazing customers their phones. Right. So we had to pay all this money out of pocket, and they wouldn't even allow us, let's say, hey, like you want a refund, that's normal and things. Like we had to issue refunds out of our own pocket and not even, you're not able to even touch on that money. I mean, it was horrible, right? And, luckily we just recently got all those phones out. It was great. Took a while. I won't even go into the Biden supply chain shortages, which is, a living hell. But I mean, it's crazy how you cannot have true free speech if you don't have a free financial system. And that shows what they did to Freedom Phone and what they've done to the truckers now. I mean, it's horrible.
It's so sad to see. And Kevin, you've been in conservatism, even academia, we were talking earlier. It's so entrenched where they don't want you to be able to speak up. But people are getting smarter. Now it's kind of the in thing to be canceled. How do you feel like conservatism is really changing for the better?
Well, look, Natalie, I don't want to get into hollow optimism, but I would say two things. The first is that when our friends are canceled, like when Papa was canceled, my kids came to me and said, Dad, we need to go to Papa John's tonight. Mm-hmm. And I said, the only better than that is we can just send him the money directly. But the point is we've got to lean into those people, our friends, who are taking stands and even thinking about what you do for a living. Thankfully, there are news platforms that are out there. But the second thing I would say is more than 20 years ago, I was the lone conservative history professor at a major state university in the Southwest. And I kind of did that because I was a contrarian, but I knew then, not that I'm super smart, but I knew then that what was coming down the road is exactly what happened to these two gentlemen. But I would sum up by saying, if you look at the people in this crowd, Natalie, if you think about the people who are pushing back, I'm now a D.C. commuter having moved to Northern Virginia from Texas. I hope the truckers shut down the traffic. That's the kind of thing that has to happen.
You could be canceled for saying that, Kevin, so you better be pretty careful. I mean, YouTube right now is probably suspended CPAC, but
Sounds
good,
great.
Right? We like when that happens. No. But Papa John, too, even when you've seen COVID kind of change the business landscape, so many people having their businesses threatened for not wanting to enforce the vaccine mandate, the mask mandate. Were you surprised by that when businesses started to having to close, when you talk about the gyms? Was that surprising to you, or were you just, yeah, now it's happening to everyone?
Well, small business is the heartbeat of American new jobs, some 60%. And I grew up and started Papa John's in '84, which was Reaganomics. I mean, how lucky was I? And, we built her up at $1,600, built her up to 5,000 stores. But I think attitude and the mindset starts at the top. You take Reagan, you take Trump, they love small business. They love entrepreneurship. The Biden administration, I can't think of anything they haven't done that doesn't hurt that small business owner. And the mindset, the attitude at the top is anti-small business. You've already got a headwind of 1 out of 10 small businesses make it. Right. And to have administration that is printing money and devaluating the dollar and doing, okay, they open up Target, but they don't open up the small grocery. I mean, it's just a double standard. It's hypocrisy, and it's all political. And so walking a mile, when you've built something from nothing, you have your heart, you have empathy for what it takes to run a small business. And to see them do this to the small business owners infuriates me, frankly.
Well, it's amazing because for so long they kept acting like the Republican Party was the establishment party. We had all the money, the lobbyists. And you see it's the small business owners that are really part of the Republican Party now. You've got Democrats, independents, perhaps they identified as that in the past, but it's almost become the people versus the establishment, and that started with President Trump, wouldn't you think?
Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, President Trump is a hero for many respects. One of them is he understood and understands present tense, as so many of our conservative leaders do. Governor DeSantis, Lieutenant Governor Robinson, the following. It's not even Democrat versus Republican. It's not even liberal versus conservative. It is self-appointed ruling class elites versus the rest of us. We need to start and I mean this in a figurative sense, a second American revolution to take back our institutions.
Well, it's exciting because there were so many different establishment media, even establishment social media, where we would talk about being suppressed. And then last January, with President Trump being suspended, so many other people, COVID misinformation, yes, it's so terrible. Of course, Fauci's still on Twitter talking about masks didn't work. Hillary's still on Twitter talking about Russia, Russia, Russia. But now you see new social media platforms like Truth Social that's coming up. Of course, you tried to do it with the phone. You talked about how Parler, when you saw Parler be suspended from the App Store, Eric, that really motivated you to kind of change the way you did business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at Truth, they're at risk of getting similarly banned by the app stores as Parler. I mean, Parler, I read, I think it was even in the Wall Street Journal, they were almost valued at $1 billion company. And then they killed that overnight. And then that's what I was trying to solve. And again, that's the same risk that Truth is going to experience. And they're going to have to balance, like, hey, if you want to stay on the App Store, you're going to have to ban these people. And that's a horrible choice. You shouldn't have to, right? And then that hurts the reputation of Truth because they get the blame for it, right? When it's actually the App Stores doing that. And again, it's just if you don't have this whole parallel economy of not just alternative social media networks, alternative phones, and absolutely alternative financial systems, which with my crypto background, that's also what I'm working on too. That's the only way we can fight is just having not just similar, but better technology and our own technology that they can't touch.
It's never been competitive before. That's the sad thing. It's big tech. People were afraid. They're too big. They're the oligarchs. They're too tough to take on, really. And President Trump started the Take On Big Tech movement, which I think has encouraged a lot of people, even the business owners that were giving interviews, not even interviews, they just went viral for talking about the way that COVID had impacted their businesses. Do you feel like you were the first movers in this to actually, especially you, Papa John, to try to get your voice out past the media, past social media, past the label of being called a racist, when you know your life, you know your brand, you know who you are?
Yeah, the two things I'd like to leave the audience with is, one is the darkness and the evilness of the folks really pulling the strings here at the top left echelon are horrific. They'd scare the stripes off a raccoon, the things they do. It's that bad. Second of all is when they do attack you, it's venomous. I mean, it's relentless. They're out to destroy you. But I've always admired Trump. Just think we didn't have Trump, when we had him, get him back. But the avenues and the things he pointed out to get us to the truth. Because if we stick to the truth, we take all their power away.
Right.
And that's we want to just stick with the truth. My issue with the vaccine is they manipulate data, they hide data, they give false data, or they make up data. And how are we supposed to make a good decision with regards to the vaccine if they don't give us all the data? And Fauci, he's the number one perpetrator of this whole thing.
At least he has his own documentary, right? Everybody wanted to watch that back in November. Nobody's heard of it. Good. I shouldn't have even said it. But no, it really is amazing because the elites and the establishment, they try to make stars out of people that have done so much damage. Whether it's Dr. Fauci, whether it's, well, of course, Biden, they think he's some kind of star, but I don't know, falling star if he was ever up there to begin with, but it's kind of lights out right now for the country. Right?
Yeah, it is. It's sad to see. And I would just really home in on this point about ruling class elites, which John, you dealt with in a bad way, Eric did. This is why Heritage, a couple of weeks ago, laid out a roadmap which harnesses all of the angst and anger and frustration that we have on big tech. And it's crucial that we understand that we fix that problem now by breaking them up. They are enemies of the people, and we need to treat them as such.
It's so true, and really President Trump taught us the art of the counterpunch because people were too afraid. Conservatives especially, we're nice people, at least for the most part. We want to talk nice, we want to try to resolve things, but you can't resolve things with people that are determined to call you racist, to call you xenophobic, sexist, every ist in the book. You have to learn to counterpunch. That's just a smart way of doing business, and that's why so many innovators, we've never seen entrepreneurship really at the levels that we have before as we are now. Eric, do you think last January really was the starting point, or does it go back to even 2015 when President Trump announced?
I mean, you just look at what big tech has done, not just to the US, but you look at even in India, the prime minister over there, they're starting their own alternative to Twitter over there. I mean, I think the questions started popping in people's minds in 2015, but I think after what we saw in 2020, it's like, we got to have our own technology. I mean, period. That's exactly what just period. There's no other way to put it. And I think that there is a lot more entrepreneurship. That's why I don't think if Trump had that easy election, we didn't see actually what happened in full light and full view, I don't think I would have jumped into it as quickly as I did. I think it really kickstarted a lot of people off into being entrepreneurial innovator and creating this parallel economy of alternative payment processors, alternative devices, alternative social media. I really think it has.
It's really interesting because liberals probably don't even talk about the way that works on the backside, where you have to actually go in the back way. Who's really, Amazon's the hosting platform for Parler. None of us really thought of that. Or the App Store. What do you do if you can't download an app? All of these different things, even campaigning, Kevin, I want to ask you, because this year you've got candidates, people trying to get their message out. You can't really put an ad on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube without second-guessing yourself, which you're not second-guessing yourself, but you could be suspended for it.
It's awful, and the group that I used to lead before coming to Heritage, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, a 501c3, great conservative group, but they don't get involved in campaigns and elections, is a really telling example. We ran some Facebook ads on election integrity, the great laws that passed in Texas, and what happened? When we converted them into the Spanish language, they were taken down because it was quote-unquote electioneering. You know what is electioneering about that? They were right. It was the truth, and that's what the left can't handle.
Electioneering is what's happening at the border. You only have to look at all the illegal immigrants coming in. They electioneer all the time, but it's so sad that it's not sad though because we're getting smarter and there's going to be a big red wave in November. But Papa John, do you feel, because you were of course the first mover in this, but do you feel the momentum has changed, that now people, the racist label doesn't mean as much when people say it, because we're actually learning how to communicate, learning how to fight back, learning how to show who we are just by our actions?
I think so. If you look at the Joe Rogan situation, he's going to make it. He is going to make it. 3 years ago when I started, I wouldn't have, he wouldn't have made it 3 years ago. But if they attack the parents and the truckers and Trump and Trump Jr. and Joe Rogan and Portnoy and me, none of us are safe if we disagree with their ideology. None of us are, because they're angry. It's the leftist side of the field, the far leftists, they're angry. They're full of hate. They're full of envy. And when you're dealing at the opposite of kindness and love and joy, you're not going to see anything from a rational perspective. It's not that they're intellectually stupid. It's just from a conscious level, they're so full of animosity that they're not going to be rational. And that's what we're dealing with here. And that's the part that really scares me.
They want to put you in a box because if they can put you in a box, they can control you. But that's why we're thinking outside the box now. And Eric, what's your message to young people? Because before, if you got into politics, you thought, oh, you run for office, you know. But now it's different. You can join, you can take on big tech. You can actually create your own app, your social media platform. What's your message to young people that want to be in politics but maybe not actually run for office?
Yeah, I mean, my background is, I dropped out of high school when I was 15 years old. I moved just by myself to Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and I was able to, that was my first startup, sold that company 2 years later when I was 17, and I just found out that the beauty of the internet, an uncensored, you know, an uncanceled internet, is that you can learn anything. And I think that's what they're inhibiting now, is your ability to learn. And that's actually the saddest thing of they're just suppressing knowledge, not just even political speak, just knowledge. And that's what I think. The internet, there are still places on the internet that are free. So if you're young, you know, go forth and conquer. You know, like I dropped out of high school at 15. Like, you know, I mean, I was able to get a stable life and be in a good relationship and go do and build what I wanted to do. And I think I think there's been no better time for young people to actually go do something in the world than now, because with an uncanceled internet, I think as long as you have that, a young person can do anything more than any other point in history.
Well, it's so interesting because the left, you have to go to the elite institutions, whether it's Harvard or Berkeley. But the right, you're right, it can be the blue-collar workers. It can be people that never go to college, because it's innovation. It's the spirit that really defines. You started your own business, and then when you had it taken away from you, you didn't let them take away who Papa John is.
Yeah, it strips away the non-essentials and gets you back to the basics of who you are as a human being. You know, the pity party lasted about 5 seconds, and you just got to get on with it.
Then you had a pizza party, right?
Pizza party.
After
I didn't say I had Papa John's.
Okay.
But you know, it's you know, things always work out for the best. You know, even on the darkest night, there's a shining star. You've got to take this, whatever this was. And it's been a great education. I'm very grateful what happened. I don't want to go through this again. And you've got to use that as a catalyst to go on to the next thing, whether that's Papa's Farm, whether we can change agriculture, whether we can help the nutrition and the health of society. I don't know what that next venture is going to be, but I know that the catalyst is going to come from the energy by having been done the way I was done.
The best is yet to come, because you're still trying to find the way to be at your best, because the worst is in the past, right? So the best has to be yet to come, right? That's one good thing about bad things happening, if you want to look at it kind of positively. But Kevin, what's your message to the think tanks? Because we were talking earlier, we say think tanks. We
Stop
shouldn't
using
use
think
that
tank.
term.
That's the first message.
They're action tanks, right?
That's right.
Because we don't want people to think, well, we want people to think, but we don't want people to just sit around and think. We want people to actually act. So what's your message to action leaders, not thought leaders anymore?
I love that question. Two things. The first is, the very first day I was on the job at the Heritage Foundation, December 1st, I'm an adopted Texan, as you might be able to tell. I said to all the staff, yes, we're a think tank. Most importantly, what we're doing is taking back America, and that means that every single moment of every day, we are on offense for the American people. The second thing is, and this is a comment for all of you, people who are watching the video, for John, for Eric, there's a lot bad that's going on in the world. There's a lot bad going on in the country. It's easy to get depressed. I'm going to let you know the left wants you to be that way. They want you to give up. We know from Scripture, we know from history, and we know as Americans now in this century that American people are the last best hope for the world. Don't forget that and be on offense every day.
You don't have to live canceled.
Amen.
Cancel culture is a thing out there, but if you live canceled, then they win. If you bury the talents that you have, if you stop voting because you think it's rigged, which it was rigged in 2020, but if they get you to back down, that's the only way that they win. And you guys are just such great examples of fighting back, and thank you for what you're doing out there. Thank you for what all you are doing out there. Keep it up, because you see this movement, it's only growing, and when the boss returns, he's going to find us not like Basement Biden, right? With the country buried. We're really going to come back stronger than ever before. So God bless you all. We're going to save America very, very soon. It starts in the November and the midterms, and of course online. Join Truth Social too. It's awesome. Thank you all.
Great job, Natalie.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next topic, Obamacare still kills. Please welcome, from Indiana, Senator Mike Braun. From Friedrich A. Hayek Institute, Barbara Colm. From Center for Individual Freedom, Tim Lee. And your moderator, CPAC Executive Vice President, Dan Schneider.
It is my privilege to be here with a senator with a spectacular rating on our congressional scorecard. We've been doing scorecards for 50 plus years. Senator Mike Braun is an A lifetime rating on the ACU scorecard. We are pleased that he decided to run for office to be in the U.S. Senate. Senator, why did you run for office?
So I started my own business back in the early 80s. Lucky enough, 3 of my 4 kids now are in it. When I saw what happened in 2016, when Trump came onto the scene, I was convinced half the country, if not more, fed up with business as usual in D.C. And I could have done something else, but I was a state legislator for just 3 years and said rather than go back home, big believer in term limits at the federal level, I was going to give it my whirl. And I've got the benefit of not having to calculate how I vote based upon being there forever. And if we just had that in general, I think we'd get the cream of the crop there from this country that aren't wanting to be there, get the big pension, and stay there and fall over in the halls of Congress.
Well, that gives you the platform then to address health care. We've had Obamacare weighing over our heads. This is a panel to discuss whether socialized medicine works or not. Senator, does it work?
No way it works. When you ask government to do more of anything, it'd be different if they were knocking it out of the park. But ever since the Great Society days, we know what that's like. At least there was a little willingness to pay for things along the way. But when we came upon the issue of health care, I took it on 15 years ago in my own business. And the healthcare industry is not competitive. It's not transparent. Barriers to entry, and you don't have an engaged consumer. I took those observations, completely changed healthcare for my own employees to get them engaged in their own well-being, number one, to avoid the broken healthcare system, put skin in the game so you shop as a healthcare consumer. It'd take more than our panel time today, but cut costs by over 50% 15 years ago, and they've only gone up 2% a year since then. But you got to think out of the box, relating it to what happens when you don't. The other side of the aisle, political enterprisers, hate to even use the word entrepreneurs, but it's on display in the Biden administration. If we, as conservatives, aren't more than the party of no or I'm not interested, when Obamacare came along, we didn't have anything. We should have had a solution to it along the lines of what I talked about.
So, in your private business, you found market incentives to try to drive down the price of health care for your employees. Nancy Pelosi, and I hope you're all listening to this, Nancy Pelosi has a couple different bills in Congress. She's trying to help you all. She's trying to make sure your prescription drugs are cheaper. That sounds like a noble goal, but how's she doing it? Barbara, you are actually from one of the strongest think tanks in the world, maybe the #1 think tank in Europe. There are lots of price controls in Europe. Does that work?
Well, price controls have never worked. They just bring socialism to everybody. And we have to, and I would follow up on what you have said, just what the senator has pointed out, the moral high grounds of the markets. We as conservatives believe in those values. And I think we should also put that into practice with medicine and Medicare, because after all, why should the markets not work for the pharmacy industry, for the medical industry. I think this is something that we really should put into on the ground and lay it out. And if we look at the European example, which is a totally negative one, we have socialized medicine there, and we've had it forever. Look at our sovereign, our national budgets. 2/3 of what we spend go into this direction. So there is not much left for anything else. And this is a very negative example. So be careful what you wish for. Don't fall into the trap and make this negative examples that we see in Europe. Import them, rather fight them, and don't bring the socialism into your country.
Tim, I'm going to get to you in just a second, but I want to go back to the senator who has been a successful businessman, a successful politician. Price controls, I mean, don't we all want to pay cheaper for our drugs and our health care? I mean, it's a very tantalizing thing. If all of you sitting out in the audience today, I'm sure you'd rather pay less for the drugs you take. Why can't we just have government drive down the prices with ceilings and just say, you can't charge more than that?
Because you're replacing the real economy with the federal government. And that's been on display with what they've tried to do through COVID. But on the other hand, we as conservatives can't say that healthcare currently is transparent, is competitive. So we need to do, the Trump administration had about 4 executive orders out there, from transparency to addressing these issues. You know who went after him? The healthcare lobby. Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, should have been called the Unaffordable Care Act, and it was big insurance in cahoots with big business. So we can't defend a broken industry, and we need to set the stage to where they can compete, to where there is transparency, and the consumer has to drive it. Because when I changed that in my own system, they started picking up the phone, going onto the web, saving 30 to 70% every time they engage it, even when the industry was making it difficult to do. That's what we need to do, or else Bernie Sanders runs the system someday.
Right.
Let me just briefly add from the European example again. If we have those price controls, you have one-size-fits-all politics, and this has never worked, and it will never work, because after all, we are individuals, we have individual demands and needs, and we know better what is good for us than the big government up there or somebody else up there. So we have to be very careful. We saw that with the price controls, that all of a sudden medication was unavailable for poorer countries in Europe because people could not afford it anymore. And this doesn't have anything to do with the so-called justice that everybody is promoting. So very careful. If we do that, you really outmaneuver the poorer ones. And that's a bad sign.
Yeah, I started this discussion talking about price controls. That's at the very end of this supply chain.
Yeah.
The beginning of it would be the invention side, creating these things, intellectual property. I know, Tim, you're a leading authority in Washington on intellectual property rights. Barbara, you cover these issues too. The European model, the American model. Let me maybe just say one thing. Today, Russia invaded Ukraine. That's not the beginning of the war. Putin and Xi in China, they've been stealing our intellectual property and attacking our country through cyber attacks for years and years. The theft of our intellectual property is an act of war, and it's been going on a long time. Why is it so dangerous?
Intellectual property, to quote Abraham Lincoln, it adds the fuel of interest to the fire of genius. What that means is it protects people's property rights and things that they invent, but it also incentivizes people to invent. Let me give you a quick number. The United States accounts for about 4% of the world's population. We're the largest economy in the world, but that's about a quarter of the world's economy. But we account every year for about 2/3 to 70% of all new drugs introduced into the world. Why is that? That's not coincidence. Because we protect intellectual property like no other nation in human history. It's in the Constitution, the text of the Constitution, even before the Bill of Rights.
In fact, Tim, look, I know that sometimes this gets a little wonky. I want everybody to hear this. Tim just touched on it.
When we talk about constitutional rights, we're actually talking about rights found in the amendments, or sometimes judge-created law. But there's only one right actually in the Constitution, the proper portion of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, the right of authors and inventors to the exclusive use of their ideas. Our founders understood that if we create a property interest in your ideas, that only not helps the economy, as Abraham Lincoln said. It also provides dignity. If you cannot keep what you invent, what you create with your mind and with your hands, if you can't keep that, that diminishes you as a human being. Intellectual property rights are critical to who we are as a people and as a person. Sorry for being on my soapbox. I get passionate about these ideas.
You should be.
You have to be. You have to be. It's a basic principle, because if we are not allowed to protect our property, whether it's the physical property or the intellectual property, we will not go anywhere. Innovation processes are only possible because we protect property. We protect those guys who invent and who create. And if we don't do that, we are losing out. There will not be a capitalist society without an innovation society.
And a multitude of organizations rank nations across the world in terms of how they protect intellectual property. Year after year, survey after survey, the United States is always number one because we protect it in the Constitution, but that's why we invent 2/3 of all new drugs in the world. It's a direct correlation. We protect intellectual property, and it creates that innovation. And it's not just drugs. I mean, obviously the internet, flight, the telephone, the light bulb, these are things that were based a lot of times on copyright, patent, intellectual property. So there's a direct correlation there.
And Dan, one thing to add to that, of the healthcare legs, insurance, hospitals, pharma, practitioners, the one part that works halfway would be discovering the therapies and the medicines. And then we destroy it with things like pharmacy benefit managers, where you create a middleman that sucks out between 180 and 300 billion. And that's where the lack of transparency. We do a great job of making the pill and then screw it all up with how we distribute it. I'm in the logistics and distribution business, and you are competing with a lot of different places that do the same thing, and then sometimes they get to where they might impede generics or tweak patents, and you got to be careful. But the one part that we do the best is coming up with it, because even back when the founders put it together, they recognized that was important.
Yeah, Barbara, you're from Europe, obviously. Germany used to invent lots of stuff, bear.
Yes.
They don't invent anything anymore. Why is that?
Unfortunately, because those rights are neither protected, nor do we have the right incentives for capital formation, nor the right tax structure. And these are all important incentives for enterprises and for scientists to be in a certain place to allow new ideas to become creative. And you know, if you look at the number of patents that have been protected and registered out of Austria, Germany in the past decades, this was next, in contrast to the US, zero, nothing. We're some minor. This is really very bad. And this is when politics is wrong. And we've seen that with the socialism all across Europe, when one size fits all works, when you do not protect either individual property nor entrepreneurial property and intellectual property, you're outmaneuvered. And don't tax it too high. And this is what is done as well.
Yeah. Well, I know Nancy Pelosi in the House and Chuck Schumer in the Senate are really pushing these price control bills. Senator, you have a crystal ball. Can you let us know what you think the chances of those things passing?
Well, thank goodness something like that, I think, would take 60 votes to get through in the Senate, even though they try to wedge a lot of that kind of stuff into legislation called, where you're doing it just on budget stuff. So I don't think we're going to go there, but I do believe that it's up to us as conservatives, when you've got key issues like the high cost of health care. It's the thing I wrestled with the most as a small business and as it grew, that we got to come up with proposals to fix those things. And that's going to be taking on some of the powers to be. And a lot of this is coalesced between big government and big lobbyists. The biggest lobbies in D.C. would be pharma, insurance, hospitals. And then you'd think the U.S. Chamber would be for making it more transparent and competitive. Well, they're with them, not with the rest of us business owners that want just the chance to compete with no leg up from government. And sadly, the biggest business in our country is healthcare, almost double what it costs the rest of the world for similar results. So a lot of improvement. That's where we win as conservatives, not being the party I know, or I'm not interested with good ideas.
Well, Tim, the senator gave us a prognostication on the health side, just more broadly on the IP side. What's your temperature of D.C. now and the left trying to attack intellectual property rights? That was a big push for them a few years ago. Are they still trying to do that?
Yeah, they are. With the vaccines, you saw the Biden administration say that they were going to disrupt the patent rights of the groups that invented those vaccines. But the public opposes that. The Center for Individual Freedom did a study where the public, by about a 3-to-1 margin, opposes the Biden administration just forfeiting those patent rights. And so you do see some danger from existing D.C. establishment politicians. And the people don't like it, and it's harmful.
I mean, frankly, when the Biden administration talks about, what was the technical term you used? The Biden administration is going to...
Well, they're just going to forcibly forfeit the rights of the patent rights of the groups that invented the vaccines to get it across the world.
That sounds like theft of property to me.
It is.
It sounds like government is taking stuff.
And they had guaranteed those same rights when they incentivized those groups to invent those vaccines. And so they pulled the rug out from under them. So it's very unpopular, and that's not the way to get new drugs out into the world. Really quickly, too, in terms of price controls, if you just look at some of the numbers, for about 200 drugs that were invented between about 2011 and 2019, almost all of them were available in America. In Europe, approximately 50% of them were available. So price controls don't lower the costs. In many cases, they mean you don't get those drugs at all. Just look at those numbers.
You know, you can look at Castro's Cuba. He could impose price controls on bread.
Right.
All that meant is there were long lines for bread, and you couldn't get bread. Some of these principles are so simple.
If you prohibit tax competition, you end up with very high tax rates everywhere, and not lower. And it's the same thing. As
Well,
simple.
Do we have, I'd like to give each of you a couple minutes, any closing thoughts that you may have. We'll end with the senator. But Tim.
Closing thoughts are, if you look at intellectual property, it protects fairness. These are property rights, just like every other sort of property rights, but it also creates real-world incentives and results where we get those inventions. Americans create those things, whether it's pharmaceuticals or other types of inventions and artistic creations. The proof is there in the real world, and so we've got to protect that, and it's also fairness.
Barbara.
I would argue that we should allow the individual to be self-responsible and to choose and pick from the choices the market provides, and allow the moral high ground of the markets to work.
All right, it's the right thing as human beings. It's the right thing for our pocketbooks.
We have to do it.
Yeah.
And fight for it.
Yeah.
And never give up.
Senator.
And as we're talking about health care, when I decided to run for Senate, it was with that frustration that on Main Street, Southern Indiana, Jasper, where I'm from, when I at least had the wisdom to move back there. My wife's had a business in our downtown for 40-some years. You know, I built the business there. It's different from how the economy works in the corporate world. So normally, that tier is teamed up with big government. And a lot of the dysfunction that we're talking about, price controls, would be due to markets not working when you concentrate power. That's happened in tech, it's happened in agriculture, it's happened in healthcare. Most of us have to live in the embrace of competition, transparency, and giving it your all, and do not have lobbyists on your staff to boot. That's what the founders set up years ago, and what always amazed me about them is when Washington and Jefferson were done, they hurried back to Mount Vernon and Monticello because they actually liked what they were doing better before, even in those heady times. A lot of it just takes getting back to what the country was built on, and you can never get where power is concentrated in an unresponsive government like I sense now we're dealing with here. Europe, it's been that way for a while. And especially when business and big corporations throw in to that same mix, it's called the swamp.
Senator, you're a champion for freedom. Thank you so much. Barbara, Tim, on your respective continents, you're doing wonderful work. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
So about CPAC is CPAC. There's a few different things I love. I get to see some of my favorite speakers, some of my favorite representatives. I mean, we have Governor Ron DeSantis here. We have President Trump coming. And also, it's a good way to see your Facebook friends list, because everybody you see on Facebook is from all over the world, if you have a network on Facebook.
It's been great meeting a lot of people from around the country that are just excited to be here, share information. We've got finding a lot of friendly people too, which I don't think you necessarily find at all events. Everybody is just looking to have an enjoyable time and get good information.
Associate with everybody that's anybody in the conservative political side of the spectrum. And for me, it's an invaluable experience to be able to talk to people from across the country, other candidates that are running, to get input from them, to meet them, and hopefully we can meet each other in D.C. after November.
Great question. I think we need to have a process in place to stand for our Constitution first and foremost, and that we take the time to make sure that the people that are running for office actually share the values, the founding principles that our founding fathers had.
National School Board Association, I know you can hear us. We are loud, we are bold, and we will not be silenced.
What's important about today is we stand for freedom. Now, we stand for freedom with the brave people who are taking to the streets in Cuba, but we don't just stand with Cuba, we stand with freedom-loving people everywhere.
But I do want to say to the man that is in that White House, what he has done is simply unacceptable. He has failed the Afghan people. He has failed the Afghan women and children. He has failed our military. He is leaving Americans behind.
You know, all they do is they use us. They've been using us for decades.
We share one thing in common, and that is to protect our children. That is to give our children the best possible education we can in this great country. I am the mother of 5 daughters, and it is a priority that we teach them the good values of America.
Ladies and gentlemen, The Invasion, a conversation. Please welcome former Director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Tom Homan. Utah Attorney General, Sean Reyes. From townhall.com, Julio Rosas. Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton. And your moderator, co-host, CPAC Now, Mercedes Schlapp.
All right, don't get tired, okay? It's just day one, okay? There's a lot to do, a lot to cover, and I'm so honored to be here with these great patriots. Can I get a round of applause for this fabulous group? Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. This panel is called The Invasion, and yes, this is what's happening in our southern border every single day, and each of these individuals have such a unique perspective and have been involved in really either covering the border or understanding what's happening at the southern border. So let's start, Ken Paxton, with you. Can I just say, one of the best attorney generals, and Sean, I'll get to you too. I mean, how cool is this? I get to talk to two of the best attorney generals. This is amazing. But Ken, you've been involved firsthand. You know what's happening at the southern border. Talk about what, from the legal standpoint, the lawsuits that you all have been involved in, whether it's CAM or also what's happening with the Remain in Mexico policy.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you all for being here and having me here. It has been amazing. From day one, we started suing Biden over immigration. I think day 3 was our first lawsuit when he came out on day 1 and said, I'm not enforcing deportations anymore. Right. We got our first injunction on day 6. I don't think that's ever happened that fast against a sitting president. Since then, we've had our 9th lawsuit, which was over the Central American Minors Program, which many have not heard about, but it's pretty amazing. You can now come into this country, claim asylum. You're supposed to remain in Mexico. You're supposed to be put back in Mexico. That's the Remain in Mexico program that Trump reinstituted. We've sued over that. We're winning over that. But meanwhile, if you claim asylum, they will now fly your other kids up, along with other caregivers on taxpayer money, and they'll let them come into the country.
Okay, wait a second. So they will fly the rest of their family into the United States. That is what's happening right
if
now.
If you're from one of the 3 countries, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, you get treated special. There's no law related to this. This is totally made up by the Biden administration. Obama did it too.
Right.
Trump stopped it. It's completely made up, and we sued over this a couple of weeks ago.
Wow. Julio, let me go to you real quick on this Operation Lone Star. We know Governor Greg Abbott has taken the lead on this. Is it being effective? Are we seeing results happening at the southern border in stopping illegal immigrants from entering through the southern border?
It certainly helps. I mean, it's very. I've been on multiple ride-alongs with Texas DPS. They're doing outstanding work down there, and it's unfortunate because they can only do so much at the same time because the issue of immigration as a whole, that's a federal job. That falls under the responsibility of the federal government. But what do you do when the federal government doesn't want to actually enforce immigration law or basically incentivize more people to come? So Texas DPS has done outstanding work. I've been along in the helicopters. I've been on boats, gone through ranches, trying to hunt, track down the people that are trying to get away. The gotaways that are at the highest levels in recent memory. And so it's unfortunate that Texas has to do it, but if Texas isn't going to do it, along with the other border states, then a lot more people are going to slip through Border Patrol because Border Patrol is completely overwhelmed, unfortunately.
Yeah, Sean, you've been dealing a lot with the human trafficking component of this. Tell us, has it gotten
left office. And is the Biden administration doing anything to stop human trafficking at the southern border?
No, and yes, it has gotten worse. Mercy, really quickly before I answer that, I just have to say how fortunate Texas and Florida are to have the attorneys general that they do, helping to lead this fight against human trafficking on the border, drugs. It's amazing. Ashley Moody, our colleague, they have led out on lawsuits and letters and everything else. Attorney General Paxton hosted a number of us at the border, and what we saw down there just a few weeks ago validated all of our biggest fears, that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Alejandro Mayorkas have absolutely abdicated the rule of law, abandoned their oath, violated every sense of normalcy by their open border policy. And the reason we know that, and Ken knows that, is because we've prosecuted some of the largest human trafficking cases, some of the biggest fentanyl cases in America, and some of the largest organized retail crime cases. And it's because of that failed policy. Everybody is focused on the invasion of Ukraine, as they should be. That's critical. But as little as the administration has done to deter the invasion of the Ukraine, they have done even less to deter the invasion at the southern border. And we, all of our states, are now border states because of that. We are all dealing with the death and the suffering and the fallout of that. And that administration has blood on their hands. They have lives and innocence on their hands and on their heads. And thank goodness we have people like this on this panel to stand up and hold them accountable, Mercy.
Tom, I think of you, just decades of service, understanding what has really happened at the border. Has it gotten substantially worse? I mean, they've talked about abolishing ICE. It almost sounds to me like they've almost done that. The Democrats have almost done that just by trying to keep them powerless.
Well, first of all, let me say this. Ken Paxton should be the Secretary of Homeland Security, for the one we have sucks. First of all. And I mean that. I've written more affidavits for Ken Paxton's office than I did my whole career. So I'm with Ken. We're suing the hell out of him. We're 3-0, and hopefully we'll be 4-0 after yesterday. But look, I've said this many times. You're right. I started in the Border Patrol in 1984. I was the first ICE director that actually came up through the ranks. So the 20,000 men and women that worked for me, I didn't ask them to do anything I didn't do myself. But I worked for 6 presidents, starting with Ronald Reagan. And I respected them all. But every one of them had their idea how to secure the border. Some took it more seriously than others. Some had different ideas how to secure the border. But now we have a president, the first president in my lifetime, first president in history of this nation that came into office and unsecured the most secure border we ever had under President Trump. And that itself should cause him to be impeached, in my opinion. Because I tell you what, people are going to say what they want about President Trump. I've done this for a long time. He did more to secure that border than any president in my lifetime. And I think he's the greatest president of my lifetime.
Yes.
Because he was able to accomplish a 34-year low in illegal immigration, 84% decline in illegal immigration. So all those people want to say Trump's policy is humane and Tom Homan's a Nazi, let me tell you something. How many women weren't getting raped when there were 84% decline on illegal immigration? How many children weren't dying? How many women weren't trafficked? How many pounds of fentanyl didn't come to this country that killed over 100,000 Americans? President Trump saved lives by securing the border.
Yes, that's right. Ken, simple question. What about the border czar?
Who?
The lady that was up in Munich and making all misspeaking on Russia. Tell me about the border czar.
Yeah, so I mean that's pretty much a joke, and I want to thank Tom for what you all did. He is right. President Trump did more to stop illegal immigration and save lives, and lives in so many different ways. I mean, you just look at the fentanyl overdoses now. The total drug overdoses in our country are up 30%. Think about the number of border agents who have gotten COVID. The number of border agents who have died in the last year is up 275%. That's because of COVID and the fact that these people are coming in and they have COVID. And then guess what? They're not tested and they get spread all around the country in the middle of the night on buses. I've talked to law enforcement. They tell me they just get off the bus and they just disappear. The fact that we have a border czar, I mean, I can't name one thing that she's done to secure the border. I can't name one thing that Joe Biden has done to secure the border. All I can tell you is that they look at federal law as non-related to them. they do what they want to do, and somewhere we've got to be able to hold them accountable. We're doing it in the courts, but we need to stop them because they're going to destroy this country. And I think they have two goals. I think they want to basically have an amnesty program for 10 million people in 4 years, and I think they want to bring as many people as they can to Republican states because they see how successful Texas and Florida and Utah and other Republican states are, and they're bringing a lot of cost and a lot of harm to our states.
Julio, you've talked to, this is what you live and breathe every day. You've been at the border how many times already?
I've lost count.
You've lost count.
More than Kamala.
More than Kamala, definitely, yes.
Low bar.
Little more. You're on the ground. You're talking to the Border Patrol agents. What is their message? Like, what do they tell you? And what's their frustration that they're experiencing under this Biden administration?
Their message is that they know what's happening is really messed up because, a lot of them have worked under multiple administrations. A lot of them have seen, most recently, what was happening under the Trump administration where they were seeing progress. The border's been a problem for many, many decades, but at least it was going a step in the right direction. Now it's like 10 steps back, and it keeps going backwards. And so they're very, very frustrated. They're very, very demoralized. They signed up to protect the border, and they can't do that because when you have 500 people, like in Eagle Pass when I was down there, 500 people show up at one time. Well, all the resources have to be dedicated to taking care of them and process them. And so that leaves entire miles of our border completely open. And so, yeah, our border is open. And one of my sources out in Yuma, he told me that he had never seen as many recently dead bodies in his entire 16 career, in his long career within the Border Patrol. And he's very concerned that that number is going to increase this summer. And so they know what's happening down there is not what it should be. And it's just, again, it's just unfortunate because we know what spurred this surge. It wasn't just because of COVID. It wasn't just because of the normal push factors. The pull factors is that the incentives to take this very dangerous journey is coming from the U.S. government.
What do you think are the incentives that are telling, the people, it's almost like Biden has a bullhorn saying, come on in, it's the United States because you're not going to get penalized.
Money and votes, but Mercy, let me share with you some really sobering statistics, and then really quickly I want to touch on race and this false narrative of humanity and what the left always tries to portray this issue as. To build on what General Paxton said, we just joined Florida 2 days ago in calling for the resignation of Secretary Mayorkas for these numbers, because of these numbers. And I want you to hear these, and I want you to this to sink in. 100 million, 400 million, 47 billion. What does that represent? 100 million. When we were down on the border, whether it was federal or state assets supporting our federal men and women in uniform, they said there are $100 million worth of human beings being trafficked weekly, not monthly, not annually, weekly. That's billions of dollars of these people being sold for sex, for forced labor, for their organs, for illegal adoptions, not to mention the billions that are made off of them being illegally brought over. That's the human trafficking epidemic that we have, and thank goodness we have people like Jaco Boyens, Tim Ballard, many of Matt Whitaker, who's speaking later on, Eduardo Verastegui, all friends of CPAC who are here fighting on that front. 400 million are just the number of lethal doses that Texas, as state assets, intercepted of lethal fentanyl. That's only what they had. If you count CBP, that's another 2.5 billion doses last year, and in only 2 months, this is the scary trend. Since December of 2021, 1.08 billion lethal doses confiscated at the border. That's enough to kill every man, woman, and child in the U.S. multiple times over. And the scary part, we're only catching some of it.
Right.
What about everything else coming through? And then a lot of that is fueling what was 47 billion. It's between 47 and 70 billion organized retail theft, because so many of those brought across are forced to steal.
Yeah.
And then that money is used to fuel what? Labor trafficking and more drugs. That is so sobering. These people being brought across are victims, and we're trying to stand up and help protect them, yet the left constantly calls us racist. I'm telling you, I'm not racist. I am the great-great-grandson, the great-grandson, the grandson, the son of immigrants who came and built America, just like so many immigrants out here in this nation. We know that immigrants build America, but it has to be done legally. It has to be done under the rule of law.
Right.
And you asked what fuels it? It's all money. The cartel, it's all profit. You think they care a whit about a human being? No. When we're when we're out with DPS there in Texas in the freezing cold on the Rio Grande and they're showing us the rivers that they patrol, they say when they're in hot pursuit, the cartels, what do? They take a little baby or a little child and toss them into the freezing river. We have to pull over to save their lives while they abscond and get away, selling and trafficking more. That's who we're dealing with.
That's what we're up against. Our forces are depleted, outgunned, outmanned, and if we don't stand up as a people and say enough and hold this administration accountable, this invasion is even more dangerous than the invasion that's going on right now on the other side of the world.
So, Tom, the Attorney General, I mean, it's a bleak picture.
So do we have any hope for the future?
I'll tell you a story that I have hope, that gives me hope. And I've told you a story before. I was on Fox. I did a Fox show one morning, and I lost my temper as usually I do, because I've seen so much death on the border, and I'll never forget holding a 5-year-old child that suffocated to death in back of a tractor trailer with 19 other migrants. The stories I could tell you that keep me up still at night. So I get upset. So as usual, I was on Fox and Friends. They showed a video clip of Mayorkas saying the border's closed and secure, and of course they do that just to get me riled up. So of course I got mad and I started spitting and yelling, and at the end of the show, I took my mic off, my earpiece off, and my cell phone rang. It was President Trump. It was Tom. 2 things for you. Just saw you did a great job. 2 things for you. Number 1, that picture behind you, is that when I gave you the National Security Medal? Yes, sir, it is. Well, blow it up. They can't see myself. And what gives me hope is the second thing he said to me. He goes, Tom, stop getting so pissed off. You and I will fix this shit in 2024. That's what gives me hope. And look, I told him, he comes back, I come back. Ken, you'll still be there. We'll all be there, and we'll fix it. We can fix it. President Trump fixed it once before. We'll do it again.
I have to say, Tom, you do a pretty decent impression of Donald Trump, but Matt Schlapp does the best impression of Donald Trump. Okay? So, Ken, these numbers are staggering. Just in January, we've seen 153,941 border encounters. This is just in January alone. You're talking about over 1 million in 2021. I mean, how can Texas manage this without the support of the federal government?
It's a challenge every day. I mean, the numbers literally doubled from when Trump came in to Biden's first year, and then doubled again. So the numbers are massive. It's 300 or 400% increase in illegal immigration. And I think the way to really feel this, if you ever had the chance to go to the border and just meet with some of these ranchers, some of these people that have to live with this fear every day of people crossing their property. They don't know who they are.
Right.
They're afraid to go outside because they don't know who's on their property. They don't know if they're cartel members. Their property is destroyed. Their vehicles are destroyed. Their cattle is destroyed. I've seen people move out. They can't sell their property because no one wants to buy it because they're afraid to be down there. I mean, this is real. And what I wish Joe Biden or whoever, what's her name, the czar, I wish she would go actually meet with
the vice president.
Whatever her name
come
is.
on.
We both serve with her. We know her. So we know her. She is afraid to do her job. But if she would actually, I would love for her to have just a chance to talk to these ranchers and these people that are dealing with fear every day because their lives are being devastated by very dangerous people that all they care about, Sean's right, all they care about is money, power.
You know what really bothered me was that I've asked certain congressmen and senators, and I ask you this question as well, has Kamala ever reached out to you to talk about the border?
I have never. I'm sure Sean gets calls, but I've never been
speed
called.
dial.
Yeah, right. I've never been called by anybody in the administration. That's what was a great thing about the Trump administration. I mean, look, if you had a disagreement, you could call them, and guess what? We could talk.
No, wait, you would call the president, like Tom would do, and Sean could do, and be like, Mr. President, and he actually, this is what's great, he returns your phone call. Like, that's the best part about it. It's not like you have to go through 20 million people to talk to them. And I think with Kamala, it's just, she's out to lunch with her sister, I think, who's running her office. But I agree. I think that that's a big challenge as well, is the fact that they don't have any interest in learning about what is happening down there.
It is shocking to me that they wouldn't at least talk to us. At least, I mean, clearly they can see the numbers. What's happening with drug overdoses, what's happening with the spread of COVID, what's happening with crime. And they just don't
I mean, I hate to say this, it seems to me that what they're willing to trade all of these bad things for votes.
Right.
For a bad result for Republican states.
Right. Let me go to you, Julio. You have a book that came out, fiery but mostly peaceful. Tell us about the book. I know it might have a little piece of this is a lot more on Antifa, but tell us about the book, why you wrote it.
Yeah, so I wrote Fiery but Mostly Peaceful. It's about all the riots that I covered in 2020 and a little bit into 2021. Just talking about these were riots, and it shouldn't be that hard to say that they were, but you know, the mainstream media had an agenda, and I witnessed a lot from Minneapolis. I was in Kenosha, saw the second half of the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting. And because I was at a lot of these events, I saw history firsthand, and unfortunately, you know, it was happening over and over, and we had a large part of the media, and you know, Democrat politicians as well, saying that it wasn't as bad, or it was people like me just exaggerating. And so that comes out May 3rd. And so because the book's not out yet, I'm signing book plates at Town Hall's booth at 4:30. So when it does come out, you can just slap that on, and boom, you got an autographed
But don't
copy.
you think that one of the big messages, Julia, is the fact that it's about chaos? The Democrats like to push this whole agenda on chaos, whether it's chaos in the border, chaos in the cities. What's the reason why they are trying to push the chaos?
Because they like to think that their way is better, when we know for a fact, and I know for a fact, whether it's in an American city or whether it's down at the border, it's not. And to say that this open borders is compassionate, it's just an absolute lie. Just really quickly, just this past month, Border Patrol agent found an infant that was wrapped up in camouflage and tucked underneath a brush, and they encountered a group first before finding the infant, and they had the group later expelled under Title 42. But I mean, stuff like that happens all the time. And when you incentivize this surge, more instances like that are going to happen. And the sad part is they're not going to find all the babies in time.
Yeah.
And it's really, really, really aggravating. And what the Attorney General here is saying, I mean, I've been called a white supremacist, I've been called a race traitor for just showing what's happening at our border. And it's not racist to say, hey, this is wrong. It is racist to incentivize.
And Sean, they leave the babies, literally, like we'll leave them right on the street or near the street. I mean, it's tragic what we're seeing.
Tragic. But the question you asked is, Mercy, is a great one. Why chaos? Why anarchy? Because those are the antithesis of the rule of law, and they're afraid of the rule of law and the principles that we champion. A couple other stats that are just staggering. 213% increase for sex predators coming across the border just in the last year. A 70% decrease in the number of deportations from 270,000 down to about 57,000 over a year and a half's amount of time. President Trump did more than any other president to fight human trafficking, the opioid epidemic, which is still the greatest killer in America today, and mental behavioral health challenges. He signed 988, which most people don't even know about yet. It's the 911, not for physical emergencies, for mental behavioral health emergencies. And because of these failed policies, all that he's done is threatened to be undone because of what General Patton said. COVID, the combination of drugs, COVID, and crime is creating such stress on America.
Right.
Physically, but also mentally and behaviorally. I think those invisible prisons are ones that we have to be honest about and talk more about as conservatives and own that issue and not be afraid of that.
Right. Tom, explain a little bit the family unit versus the single males that are coming in and they're literally in the middle of the night being dumped in these cities.
I can do that. Before I do that, I want to say one thing. In addition to everything that's been set up here on the border, I started my career as a Border Patrol agent. These are 20,000 patriots. They're the finest 1% this country has. And I've never seen, in my 35-year career, I've never seen such hatred for these men and women by this administration. The president's first speech, he said that last administration watched children die of starvation on the banks of the Rio Grande. They attacked the horse patrol. I was a Border Patrol agent. They did nothing wrong. I know the rules of engagement. They did their job. The only people that did anything wrong were the Haitians that entered the country illegally. But the only humanity on that, and I'm sticking up to the Border Patrol, again, I love the Border Patrol. I wore that uniform. I know what it's like to be out there. 3 o'clock in the morning, a sensor goes off. You don't know what's coming down that dirt trail. They're going to stay in there and take it on. Is it just somebody looking for a better life? Or is it a heavily armed drug smuggler? They don't know, but they're going to take it on. The finest 1% this country has, and this administration has attacked them. The only humanity on that border are the men and women wearing that green uniform. The last time I was on the border, I want to tell you a real quick story. It'll take just a second. Last time I was on the border, which was just a few weeks ago, I was down there and they caught about 200 family groups within a 20-minute span. There was a 7-year-old little girl scared to death by herself. Your heart broke for her. And this big burly Border Patrol agent, bigger than me, got on his knees, spoke to her in Spanish. I speak Spanish. I know what he said. I won't share that with you. And that little girl cracked a smile and hugged that Border Patrol agent. These are the men and women serving on the front line. So if you see one, shake their hand, because this administration has turned their back on these men and women that put their lives on the line for this country every day. I had to say that. I'm sorry I didn't get to your question, but that was important to say that.
Well, let's do quick final thoughts. What message do you want to leave with our CPAC patriots who are here and are watching on our live stream?
Look, it's amazing to me how fast they've done this and how devastating. I've never seen anything like this. I thought it was better under Obama. This is the worst I've ever seen. And that's why I think we're in the middle of a crisis, not just about the border. We're in a crisis about our Constitution, and ultimately that's what we're talking about. Can the President of the United States literally just ignore what Congress has said and do what he wants? And it's people like you and me that are going to have to stand up and fight, and we're really going to have to fight. And I would just finish by saying it was Benjamin Franklin that said, if we don't hang together, we're going to hang alone. And so I really believe that. I think this is the time for all of us to fight back, to not be afraid of their threats, because they are going to threaten us. Look what they're doing with parents. Look at the Attorney General of the United States with parents, telling them that if they went and spoke to their school boards, that they could be investigated by the FBI and prosecuted for terrorism. That is not America. That's 1930s Germany. That's China. That may be Russia, but it's not America. And it's every parent has to speak out. Every one of us has to speak out. And I would challenge you, have courage. Do not be afraid of them.
Julio. Yeah, I know it can be kind of easy to think that, you know, what's happening in McAllen or Del Rio or, you know, any of the other Yuma, that it doesn't really affect the, you know, where some of us may live further into the country, but it does. And I mean, it doesn't stay, none of that stays within those border towns. They're all trying to get somewhere deep within the United States. And so just try to be educated, read Town Hall. And there's other great places too, but it's just the fact that this is a problem, and I hate to be kind of the bearer of bad news, but I don't see it getting any better even if Republicans take back Congress, because a lot of what caused this surge is it came from the executive branch, not the legislative branch. So we're going to be in this for the long haul, unfortunately, but you know, I think, you know, by reporting on it and like having people see what's really going on down there, that, you know, maybe something can happen. And I'm sorry, I have to plug again. I'm signing book plates at Town Hall's booth at 4:30.
We'll be there.
The first ones to
John.
get the book. All of us, ladies and gentlemen, and all of you, your voice, or you're supporting those of us who are able to hold them accountable in the courts of law, please, please keep up the fight. We need your voice.
I'll say it again. We went from the most secure border in my lifetime, and I spent 35 years doing this job, to historic illegal immigration this year. Not by accident, not by mismanagement, not by incompetence, by design. This is open borders. And I'm pissed off, and I hope you are too. So get to the voter booth. Let's put our patriots back in charge of the federal government. And God bless Texas. The Texas DPS, they've arrested numerous criminals. Every pound of fentanyl you take off the street, you're saving lives. You know, Texas, every person you arrest entering the country legally is one less getaway. God bless the state of Texas. God bless the attorney generals who are fighting the fight for this country.
Thank you very much.
Woo. Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Director.
And God bless our panelists. I'm going to argue that this is the best panel ever, but don't tell the rest of the panels, okay? Thank you all. Thank you all for being with us, gentlemen.
Great job. Great job.
Great job.
Greetings from Red State, Idaho. I am so grateful to CPAC and ACU to receive this conservative award.
I hope you're enjoying beautiful Orlando, Florida. I'm Amy Loudenbeck from Work Hard Report.
I really don't think about the award when I'm voting. I think about things like, does it make sense? And frankly, most things that make sense are conservative principles.
Here in Arizona, conservatism means not only fiscal responsibility, but it also means election integrity.
Supporting good legislation that promotes personal and economic freedom is one of my highest priorities as I serve in the Kansas House of Representatives.
It truly is an honor. Again, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for all those who are there in Orlando investing, getting ready for 2022. It's going to be a big year for conservatives. Keep up the great work. Thank you again.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Schlapp with CPAC, and it's my privilege to tell you that we've got a very important project that we've just announced, the First Amendment Fund. It's a brand new fund that we've created through our criminal justice reform efforts to raise money to take care of you, Americans who are being canceled and desecrated out there around the country. We know it just happened in Virginia, where parents were called domestic terrorists by the Biden administration, where people who just want to express their political views are canceled left and right. Now we have this terrible specter of a vaccine mandate where you can lose your job or be prevented from going to a restaurant or go to school according to your vaccination status. These are all the things that are happening in this country that are making people realize that America is in a fight to defend the principles that have made her great. If you want to be involved in this important effort, please go to conservative.org, click the link for the First Amendment Fund. Please donate to this C3 to help these victims across the country, including those who are just involved in politics, to make sure they have the legal representation they need to be able to live their great American life.
Outside the United States Supreme Court right now, and it is an amazing sight. Now, this is my very first March for Life, and I really hope it is the last March for Life here in our nation's capital, as the United States Supreme Court is hearing a case that could possibly overturn Roe v. Wade.
I came to march for the sanctity of life, because abortion is murder. Across the board, it's murder.
Abortion was never taught to me in school. When they taught to me the scourge that affected the black community, they only told me about slavery and not being allowed to vote, all these different things. They never told us what the Democrat Party and what Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood directly did to my people. So when I learned about it, I was purely disgusted, did all the research, and have been pro-life ever since, because I knew that my people had a place in this nation, and racist Democrats believed that we didn't, so they supported all these organizations that shut down our right at the very beginning.
And if you look at it, the most abortion clinics are in minority neighborhoods. And so the BLM too, not really Black Lives Matter, because you're murdering, it's more the higher percentage of black babies aborted than white.
Yeah, since Roe v. Wade in 1973, there's been over 60 million babies aborted, and over 60% of them have been people of color, minorities. Would you consider that the idea of abortion would be on the exact same moral ground as the moral of slavery?
Yeah, no, totally. Like, that's exactly the same way I see it. Either we have them serve us on the field, serve us in our house, doing all these different things, or they don't deserve to be alive.
As we wrap it up here in our nation's capital, right outside the United States Supreme Court, I just want to let everyone know what an amazing day it has been here in Washington, D.C.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome former advisor to President Donald Trump, Kim Guilfoyle.
Well, hello, hello. How are we doing, CPAC? All right. and there's nothing former about it. How about current and national finance chair to the greatest president this country has ever seen, President Donald J. Trump. It's great to be here with all of you today, all the freedom and liberty-loving Americans that are out there watching CPAC, that live for it and breathe for it every single year. It is such an incredibly important time in American political history. We are all witnessing it. We all need to be a part of it and not be passive observers. Because I have good news for you. Change is coming, and it's because of patriots like each and every one of you in this room. And together we will make America great again. So who misses President Trump? Like every minute of every day, right? You wake up, you go to bed, you're like, ugh, I miss him, I miss him. And I just want to say, and I think you all know, pop quiz people, the answer is Trump was right about everything, right? Trump was right when he told you the Democrats were spying on his campaign, okay? Fact check true. Trump was right when he said the deep state was undermining the rule of law. Trump was right when he said they would open our borders, allowing drugs and criminals to flow freely into our country. Trump was right about Biden keeping businesses and churches closed and masking our children. Shame on him. And Trump was right when he said dictators and world leaders like Vladimir Putin would see weakness in Joe Biden. Exactly. So you're paying attention, you get an A. You get an A for the day. Just look at what's happening in Ukraine. Look at what happened. Shameless loss of life, American blood and treasure, American equipment and intelligence in Afghanistan. President Trump's philosophy was peace through strength. Biden's is chaos through weakness. I know times are tough now, but believe me, hold dear, patriots, because change is coming. And our country will truly be great again. And regardless of what Democrats may tell you, they're lying, okay? America is still the greatest nation on earth. And this great nation is the home of the brave and the land of the free. And in this country, we stand for our flag. We salute our veterans and the men and women in blue and law enforcement that serve our communities, our cities, fearlessly throughout this country. God bless them. We owe them a debt of gratitude. Now, thanks to Joe Biden, we are a country with this weak administration, and we are at the risk of losing that freedom, that respect for our men and women in blue and our veterans, and sadly, the respect and fear that people had from other countries about this country being strong, this country having the moral fortitude, the strength to do what was right. That's the leadership that we had under President Trump, that this country is thirsting for each and every minute, every day. We have seen so quickly, so fast, more probably than any of us could have anticipated what is happening to our nation. We have seen how fast things have gotten out of control. And to those who don't think elections have consequences, take a look around. It turns out rigging elections for incompetent, weak leaders actually has consequences, does it not? Thanks to rigged elections, we have inflation at its highest in 40 years, the price of gasoline going through the roof. Store shelves remain empty thanks to bare shelves Biden. That guy. Can't we just quit him? I mean, haven't we suffered enough? Honestly. Junior's making me ride my bicycle around town because we can't afford the gas at this point. I mean, come on. But we can
And we will make change in this country. In fact, we must, because there are Americans, hardworking Americans, that are struggling to provide for their families. And not too long ago, they actually had more discretionary spending and choice and cash in their pockets because President Trump said, you know better what to do with your hard-earned money than the tax and spend liberals in Washington, D.C. And now we have illegal aliens crossing the border in possibly the highest numbers that we have ever seen. And you heard the words of the fearless Border Patrol agent as he spoke so eloquently and with emotion and grace about what he has seen at the border, about the sacrifices and the way that this administration, the country, has turned its back on ICE, on Border Patrol agents that are putting it on the line every single day and night, and we stand and we salute them for their courage and their sacrifice to this country. Forget Miley Cyrus, the new wrecking ball is Joe Biden, and just under here, he's already trying to wreck this country. So what do you say if we give Joe Biden a pink slip and get him out of here? And take Kamala Harris with you while you're at it. And take Pelosi with you while you're at it. And Schumer, and AOC, and the whole group of them. Get them out of here. And Cheney too. Where's Harriet Hageman? We're going to get rid of her as well. I love it. Harriet Hageman, great candidate in Wyoming. So Biden and the radical Democrats have managed, and I kid you not, to put America last. It's like very obvious they're playing for the other team with every single decision, all the while trying to destroy President Trump's historic achievements. That's why we have to take it back. Because President Trump created the best economy our nation has ever seen. He pushed petty politics aside and did what was best for the American people. Remember that? American people. The people in this country. We apologize to no one for putting America first. That's what a true leader does. He stands for each and every one of us. Meanwhile, Joe Biden canceled the Keystone Pipeline, causing oil prices to soar and destroying thousands of American jobs in the process. And shortly after he canceled the Keystone XL pipeline, he served Putin a gift on a silver platter. Here you go, Vlad. He approved Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Can you believe this? This is what I'm talking about. Someone needs to tell Joe Biden, you're wearing the America First jersey, not the Russia First jersey, not the China First jersey, and stop exporting the American dream. Because Joe Biden has fundamentally destroyed this country in record order, and including our border. Because the protectors of our border, our national security, are so important. There's a story that really strikes me, especially with what we've heard today in the panel that Mercedes did. Biden's DHS Secretary Mayorkas recently told our Border Patrol, quote, I know the policies of this administration are not particularly popular with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, but that's the reality. So let's see what we can do within that framework. I mean, can you believe it? Talk about taking a knee. One Border Patrol agent even reportedly turned his back on Mayorkas. That's courage. That's being American and standing up for what you believe in. I believe that Border Patrol agent is a hero for standing up and being fearless for what's right. And what I ask you here today, all patriotic Americans across this country, stand up for what you believe in. Be that Border Patrol agent. Use your First Amendment rights to fight back against the Democrat incompetence that we are seeing throughout the country. Show up. Show up in record numbers to peacefully protest when Democrat officials attempt to destroy the sanctity of the United States Constitution. Show up to school board meetings when they try to indoctrinate our nation's children. Vote in midterm elections this year to put America first, fearless Republicans back in office and in the majority. That is our first step to success in taking back this great country. Ladies and gentlemen, every election matters, whether we're talking about the school board, mayoral races, and even control of Congress. I encourage, I implore you to run for office yourself. volunteer for races, and most importantly, vote. It is so important for us to fight back. Woke leftists are working overtime to strip us of our freedoms. Take a look at what's happened on social media in recent years. Almost every big tech platform has banned conservatives and Republicans for their political beliefs. Every major social media platform banned President Trump last year. If the sitting president at the time of the United States can be banned on social media, no one is safe. In communist China, they have this thing called a social credit where you're punished for having the wrong opinions or for even promoting the idea of free expression. Just look at what happened to Hong Kong. China cracked down on them and jailed people simply for wanting the ability and the freedom to express their opinion, the freedoms that we enjoy in this country. But unfortunately, our freedoms are now at that same risk, thanks to big tech and to the liberal, woke leftists. What's the difference between being punished in China for having the wrong opinions and big tech companies silencing you for daring to have conservative beliefs? Sadly now, there is no difference. These woke big tech overlords are no different than a Chinese Communist Party. They will silence you for holding the beliefs that most Americans share outside of Silicon Valley. And considering that social media is now the public sphere of discussion in the 21st century, they can completely silence you just like they tried to silence President Trump. Good luck, right? You can't shut him down. We are at real risk for losing our First Amendment rights, and most importantly, our freedom of expression. We do a great disservice to the men and women that have served valiantly in this country if we don't stand for the rights that they fought for, that families have sacrificed for. That's why we're here at CPAC today, to stand up for what we believe in, for what you believe in your family and your children. We can fight back. You can fight back. Twitter and Facebook aren't the be-all, end-all. That's right. We have other platforms now. We have President Trump's new Truth Social. Sign up, jump over, and enjoy the freedom of expression. We love it. Where free speech lives. President Trump had to fix that too. Good God. We must support freedom-loving alternatives if we want to protect our rights that are ingrained in the Constitution. And we also need our Republican lawmakers to use their power to hold these anti-American big tech companies accountable. No more rhinos. How about some real fighters like President Trump in the Congress and in the Senate, and guess what? Back in the Oval Office. And the same goes for our education system. Are you so tired of public schools indoctrinating young children? I know that I am, and I'm sure many of you had to suffer through it yourselves. Rather than teach our nation's children, our future, the skills they need to succeed in life and in the real world, they are teaching our children critical race theory. They are teaching our children to be ashamed of who they are, what sex they were born, the color of their skin, and making them apologists for history. It is shameful. This type of thing does not happen in President Trump's America. That is the opposite of what civil rights icons like Martin Luther King fought for. Think about that. But it gets worse because public schools are teaching our children as young as kindergarten that they can choose their gender at will. They are teaching our children that doctors are wrong and that we are not the gender that we were born with. I find it disturbing what's happening to our nation's children. As a mother of a 15-year-old, I speak up, I am vocal, and I do not apologize. Don't apologize when you stand for your children and for your family. And the media is complicit for refusing to cover it. I ask you today, most especially, to fight for our children. They are worth it, and they deserve your voice and your strength, and be that example of leadership and courage. But the American people are waking up, and a red wave is coming. Do you all feel it? And like I said, when Republicans retake Congress with America First candidates later this year, the first thing they need to do is stop Joe Biden's far-left woke agenda dead in its tracks. And as a wise man once said, everything woke turns to... Yep. In Spanish, we say, mierda. He's a genius, that Trump. I love him. Let's stop George Soros-funded DAs and judges across this country. Don't allow Biden to pass so-called bipartisan legislation where Democrats get everything they want and Republicans get nothing. That's why we need majority leaders and fighters to actually give us what we got coming to us, right? This will be an incredible time in American history, and it is a now or never time to take back America. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to change the course. We are at the point of no return, and it is up to all of you to vote and ensure Republicans witness the biggest landslide in our nation's history later this year. I know it is possible. I believe it is possible. We can feel the tides turning. And in 2022, the American people will retake Congress, and we will retire Nancy Pelosi and take the gavel right out of her hands. And send her back to San Francisco where she can wreck that some more. Democrats, that we will never allow them to radically transform America in their far left woke image. And as President Trump said, this is just the start. The MAGA movement is alive and well. We will show the Democrats firsthand that elections have consequences when we win a record number of seats in the midterms, and that is just step one. Step two is reclaiming the White House and returning President Trump to the Oval Office. I pray about this. And I am confident that if we are lucky to have President Trump make that sacrifice again, that he will defeat Joe Biden for a second time. And when President Trump is in the White House once again with the Congress in his corner, we will make America great again. We will fix the economy. We will secure our borders and strengthen our national security. And we will be respected on the world stage once again. We will recreate the jobs that Joe Biden destroyed and much more. If you thought the first 4 years were great, you ain't seen nothing yet. But this change, this movement starts with you, the American people. You must speak up, you must show up, and most importantly, you must vote. In 2006, ladies and gentlemen and patriots and great lovers of liberty and freedom, one request for you today. Fight. Fight. Fight for your future, fight for your children, fight for your freedoms, and fight for this country, for America, the greatest nation on earth. You are the most powerful force in this country, and I know that we can overcome the far left woke Democrats that Joe Biden has been enabling and empowering. The silent majority will be silent no more, and together we will make America great again. God bless you, CPAC. God bless America. God bless President Trump.
I'm not picking it up. You pick it up.
I'm not picking it up.
Well, somebody's got to pick it up.
I'll pick it up. They're clean. 'Cause my hand is clean. Oh yeah, I'm Charmin clean. That's how I know they're clean.
Charmin Ultra Strong is woven like a washcloth and just cleans better.
Yeah, I'm Charmin
The
clean.
kid does have a point.
My hand is clean.
Enjoy the go with Charmin. And for an extra clean finish, try Charmin Flushable Wipes.
The Florida Lottery is proud to support education by contributing